It is April 26, 2021. I am your host, Carter Ring, and this is the Ringers Podcast, coming at you here with episode 76 here on a Monday night. We are officially in draft week. Draft starts Thursday night. I cannot wait. I'm going to be live here on the Ringers Podcast, breaking down the first round and each pick and giving my analysis and just bringing the overall hype for the NFL draft. I cannot wait. So if you are a loyal listener here on the Ringers Podcast, I will be live starting at 7 o'clock Central Time here. If you want to tune in, listen to the NFL draft, and listen to me give me my thoughts on each pick and break down each pick and how they fit with that team, I'm going to be here. So check me out Thursday night here on the Ringers Podcast. Here tonight, here on episode 76, I want to talk about the reports that came out today. Ian Rappaport leaked the news early this morning, I saw when I woke up, that the Atlanta Falcons have received trade calls about future Hall of Famer Julio Jones, wide receiver. And I'm going to tell you why I think the Falcons should absolutely trade Julio Jones. And you might say, what? They're going to trade Julio Jones? Well, it's not as crazy as you think. Julio Jones he's on the wrong side of 30 at this point. And everyone knows, and if you've had Julio Jones, let's say in fantasy football, you know your frustrations with Julio Jones. I did last year, and he cost me a lot of games. Why? Because Julio Jones can't stay healthy. I mean, the thing on Julio Jones, you can make a legit argument that Julio Jones is a top 10 wide receiver of all time. I think he might be the best I've ever watched in my life. Him, maybe Antonio Brown, Megatron, those are probably the three best I've watched in my life. DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, those guys are flat-out studs. Julio Jones has a case. He's no doubt going to Canton, Ohio. But you can make a case for him being top 10 of all time. I mean, this guy, he might be the best yardage receiver of all time. I mean, he had games where he'd get 200-plus yards. He had a 301-yard performance once, right? I mean, this is out-of-this-world type of stuff, right? But that's not the Julio Jones anymore. That is in today's game. No. That's not what he does anymore. He's missing more time than actually producing. He only had 770 yards last year, and he was banged up. In the last 3 years, he hasn't been a red zone threat at all. His touchdowns have been down. I think he had a season a couple years ago with like 2 touchdowns in a season, right? So, listen, Julio Jones he's a big name, but he's not the receiver he once was. So there's reports from Ian Rappaport, a very trustworthy source, that says the Falcons are taking calls on Jones, and teams are calling as they should. A couple teams, I'd throw out maybe the Patriots, maybe the Chiefs. I don't think the Packers are calling, but they should. Maybe the Bears. There's teams that would probably want Julio Jones' services, right? I mean, let's be honest. I thought maybe last year they would have traded him mid-season, right? I've been thinking, all right, it's going to be time. Julio's going to be on the trade block soon, right? He's coming to an end. He's been there almost a decade, right? But like I said, I think at this point in his career, would you want him? Especially at that price tag. Julio Jones has one of the worst contracts in all of sports. I mean, he's got a terrible contract. It's one of the worst team-friendly deals in sports. It's terrible. And Atlanta doesn't want to make it look like that they're just going to move him because they want to get rid of the cap. It's cap relief. Then his value won't be as high, right? If Atlanta really covets Julio Jones and if teams are calling, they're going to say, all right, we want this because we really still think highly of the player. But if they make it sound like, all right, we'll take a second and some junk for him, that just looks like a cap relief type move, right? You don't want to make it look like that. If you think you can get a 1 from Julio Jones and a team wants him bad enough, then do it, right? So I look at Julio Jones and his price tag, it doesn't match the production anymore. Maybe 4 years ago it did, sure, right? I mean, you could make the case healthy, he's still a top 3 or 4 wide receiver in the league, but it's a big if. It's the biggest if in all of football. Julio Jones is never healthy anymore. And I had him on my fantasy team last year. He was hurt every week. I mean, it's gotten to the point where Julio Jones doesn't even practice anymore. Every game, he's a game-time decision every week. That's how bad it's gotten with Julio Jones. And it's sad to see, but he put up the numbers. He's already going to Canton. It's not like a what-if situation. He's already in the Hall of Fame. If he retired right now, he'd be in the Hall of Fame. But he could keep adding to his legacy, but the injuries are just taking a toll on him. And by the way, speaking of injuries and a disappointing end of the career, but a hell of a career, and if it wasn't for injuries, would have been a Hall of Famer. I want to shout out Sean Lee, Cowboys linebacker. He hung it up today. He decided to retire after 11 seasons with the Cowboys. Anyone who knows football, you know Sean Lee, 2-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowl linebacker out of Penn State. Decided to retire, and he battled injuries his whole career. Another guy, if he wouldn't have had injuries, he would have been in Canton, Ohio. So salute to Sean Lee. I hope he comes to be a linebackers coach or something for the Cowboys. He's just a very smart player, great leader. You will be missed, Sean Lee, but shout out to him. But anyways, back to the Julio Jones discussion. So I'm looking at him and I'm saying, Julio Jones is a freak, and but he's not that anymore. His production does not match the price tag, right? So he can hardly practice at this point. Stuff like that. Teams have to consider that. What's his trade market? What could you get for Julio Jones? I'm sure there's a team out there that's desperate enough at the receiver position to throw a one at Atlanta. Sure, okay. And they would be wise to take that, right? I think most teams are probably going to start with a 2, right? A 2. I wouldn't. If I was the Cowboys, let's say my team, and we don't need a receiver, but let's say we did, I wouldn't throw a 1 for Julio Jones. Heck no. Julio Jones does not stay healthy. He doesn't even play hardly half the games anymore, right? So I would not throw a 1 at him. But here's the thing with Atlanta. And they're in a prime position because they could trade him. They could set up a trade within the next couple days. The draft starts Thursday night. They could trade him during the draft. And then the trade, they could make it so it's not official post June 1st. So it doesn't have to be till after June 1st so they could save more money on the trade, right? So I think it makes a ton of sense for Atlanta to move him. Look at where they're at in the draft, too. They're number 4 overall. They could potentially draft Kyle Pitts, generational tight end, right? I mean, trust me, Atlanta fans want to see a healthy Julio Jones on the field with Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley. They'd love to see that for Matt Ryan, right? Could Atlanta go quarterback? Justin Fields, Trey Lance, whatever they, But I think they'll end up taking Pitts, right? But listen, you could trade Julio Jones, get rid of that cap, and build around Pitts and Ridley. That'd be a good duo right there, right? Pitts is that guy. He's Julio Jones, but a tight end, right? So it would make a ton of sense for them to go ahead and trade Julio Jones. I really think they should do it. If they get the right offer, they can get rid of the cap relief, and it's ran its course. I mean, he's getting to the point now where it's every week he's injured, right? Is it worth it anymore? And that contract is hideous for the Atlanta Falcons. It's disgusting, right? So it's just, this isn't a knock on Julio Jones. He's arguably the best receiver I've ever watched in my lifetime. But those days are gone. They're gone. He's not that receiver anymore, especially when he's out every week with injuries, it feels like damn near. I think they should definitely, if they get an offer this weekend, as soon as this week, they should look to move him, right? Like, I threw out some teams like the Bears, maybe the Patriots, look at other wide receiver needy teams, like maybe the Packers. I don't think they would do that, but could you imagine Packers with Adams and Jones? Whew, I don't want to see that, but, whoever tries to trade for him, I don't think it's a 1 is not going to work. Atlanta's not going to get a 1 for Julio Jones. I would be shocked. Now, there could be a team, like I said, that could get desperate enough. We've seen teams that get desperate for a receiver and then they throw more that they should have got, So I think a 2 is the baseline. I think that's where you start for Julio Jones. Again, if he's healthy, though, he still can be a dog. But I just don't think he can be healthy anymore. I really don't. We haven't seen it in how long? 5 years? 4? I mean, it's been a long time since Julio Jones has been healthy. But again, if the Atlanta Falcons, if they want to go ahead and move him and they can get an offer, do it. By all means, you're going to get Kyle Pitts likely in a few days if they take him. And if they don't take quarterback, you have Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, and other stuff. You have other team needs. Julio Jones, its time has ran its course. You went to a Super Bowl with him. He was amazing that year, but let's face it, is Atlanta going to get to a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years with Julio? Probably not. So just build around Kyle Pitts. Get cheaper at the skill positions, right? Calvin Ridley's cheap. Russell Gage is cheap. Kyle Pitts will be cheap if you draft him. So, yeah, I think the Atlanta Falcons should definitely do this. I think they should move him. I think it would make a ton of sense. But it depends who's going to trade for him and what's his value at this point. So it's a dicey move. Things are heating up here. We're about 2 days away almost from the NFL draft. I cannot wait. Lots of trades could go down. Lots of movement. Guys moving up, moving down. Could be some player movement. We will see, and it's all about to happen here in a couple days. This was episode 76 on the Ringers podcast here on a Monday night, April 26th. Should the Atlanta Falcons move Hall of Famer Julio Jones? Something to keep your eyes on here as we near the NFL draft. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you soon.